Welcome back to another CISSP video. In this video, we are going to focus on the ISO IEC 27001 risk framework. And in the CISSP exam objective, you will see under 1.9 the risk framework, and you can see ISO right here, and that is what we are focusing on in this video. Now, the ISO 27001 framework is an internationally recognized standard that is very important for the exam. Anything you see international, you need to be thinking of ISO IEC, and then obviously read the question, understand the context, but this will be a clue. The ISO 27001 is designed for Information Security Management System ISMS. If you go over to iso.org and look at the standard, you will see right here that it says the ISO IEC 27001 standard provides company of any size and from all sector of activity with guidance for establishing, implementing, maintaining and continually improving an information security management system or ISMS. That is the design. So it's for all the companies, all sector, and anyone wanting to do anything for an international purpose, right? So if we need an international accreditation or certification, whatever it is, this is probably the framework or standard we want to use. Okay, so it is designed to help organization protect their information assets and manage information security risk effectively. The ISO IEC 27001 provides a systematic approach for organization to establish and maintain control to safeguard sensitive information. The three main principle is, it's pretty simple. It's the CIAtriad: confidentiality, integrity and availability of information and data. Okay, those are the three driving principles, and that's why we always refer back to those as the triad or the trinity of the security. Either way, most standard and framework will point back to confidentiality, integrity and availability, and ISO 27001 is no difference. Okay, so this help organization meet regulatory requirements related to information security, related to privacy and lot of different things. Now, if you go over to ISO 27001 security.com, you can see the entire layout of the document, and what I really liked was this diagram that's on this web page. So this is what we are going to use for the rest of the video to walk through what is in this standard, so that you can be prepared for anything you see on the exam. Okay, so now everything in the purple, what you see in the purple is required for certification. These are also called clause. All right, so let's break down each one of these clauses so that you know what to expect on the exam. Now, clauses 0 to clauses 3, they don't really cover that much in terms of what you need to know for the exam. So you have the forward, the introduction, the scope, the references, terms that. This is all kind of simple normal documentation stuff. What we really get into the meat of this thing is in the clause 4, which is the context of the organization. So let's start here. Okay, what does this mean? The context of the organization. So basically what this comes down to is understanding the internal and external context, including the parties, stakeholders, scope, objective and everything that you need to know for information security requirement. That's the context, because every organization is different. So if you are an international bank and you are doing international financial things, it's a lot different than being an international medical company or medical organization. There are two different traits, two different things. I mean, just a vast amount of different laws, regulation, and other things that apply. But we can apply 27001 to that. Manage security requirements according to those laws, regulation, and so on. So that's going to define the context. Everything's got to be done in the context of financial sector, or everything has to be done in the context of medical sector or the governmental sector or whatever it might be. And then it also help us to understand the organizational operating environment. So what this is going to allow us to do is identify all the key factors that may impact information security. How many external facing server or interfaces do we have? Are we running in the cloud? So it's an off-prem implementation. Are we running off-prem? Are we the service provider? Are we a software as a service provider? I mean, there is a variety of things that comes into play. So what we want to understand is basically the inventory of the system. What does that operating environment look like? That's going to help us identify the different assets that may or may not increase risk, may increase threat, may increase vulnerabilities, and so on and so forth. So that's the context. Think of this as scope and objective. That's the simple way to break it down. Scope and objective. Okay. So then we get into leadership. So we need to understand the leadership, and this is going to be very simple. Stakeholder. Just think stakeholder. We are going to define the management's commitment to information security. So in that speak, we need to define policy. So we are going to define a policy that's going to show the organization's commitment to information security. We are going to define roles, the responsibilities, and also the authorities for information security. So this all gets documented into a security management or security program policy, or whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of different names, but we need to define that in a policy somewhere, and that's going to establish the clear governance with the assigned role and everything else to ensure effective oversight and accountability for information security within the organization. So leadership is stakeholder. That takes us to the planning. So after we know the context and now we know the stakeholders and who's at play here, now we need to start our planning. So when we get into planning overall, what we are going to do is we are going to establish the information security objectives. We are going to perform some risk assessment, and then we are going to develop a robust risk management framework overall using the ISO 27001. So what we are going to do essentially is start talking about what we want to do with security. How are we going to match the organizational policy? How are we going to meet the policy? And how does that policy reflect the laws, regulation, and other things that apply to us doing international business? And then upfront, we would probably be able to do some risk assessment without getting on any hardware or gear or anything like that. So we can do some risk assessment and understand, hey, this is going to pose a risk to our security objective, and then how are we going to treat that risk or handle that risk or respond to that risk, and then how do we develop a risk management plan or risk management framework that we can use to effectively implement those objectives, and then we are going to conduct risk assessment throughout. So as we are moving through the process and we are developing and becoming more mature as a security program or as a security management system, then we are going to start doing more and more systematic risk assessment so that we can identify them, prioritize them, and treat them as they arise. That's planning overall. So effectively, what we want to come out of the planning is measurable and achievable outcome and a risk treatment plan to address any identified risk and implement the appropriate control to reduce those risks or fully mitigate or adjudicate them as well. And then we moved into support. So support is where we are going to allocate all the adequate resources we need to effectively implement and maintain the ISMS. We need resources, whether it's human, so we need administrator, we need engineers, architects, we also need a budget. So if we are going to buy all these fancy tools and all this stuff to build secure system, we are going to need a budget. We are going to need a schedule, we are going to need a lot of stuff. So we are going to have to allocate those resources out so that we know what we have to work with to effectively implement our plan. Now everybody's resources are going to be different here. Your budget's going to be different. How many people you have available to help you with this ongoing process, it also be different. So it depends on the size of the organization you are working for. You could have one administrator, you could have 50, you could have $100 to spend, or you could have $1 million to spend. It really just depends on your organization and how badly they want to minimize the risk. And you are also going to document policies, procedure, guidelines, and all other necessary artifacts that we need to support the implementation of the security management system. That's going to be done during support as well, because we are going to need help from the resources. Well, we would love to save the world. We can't. We don't know everything about the system. We don't know all the answers about the databases and the countermeasures and the EC2 instance that are running and why the network set up a certain way. We just don't know those things. So we need subject matter expert to get involved, and that's why we are going to document some policies, and then we are going to implement procedures, guidelines, standards, and all other artifacts to enforce all of this within the security management system. And then we are going to provide resources, awareness, training, communication, documents, and whatever it takes to support the ISMS as well. So what this means is that once we get the security management system in place, and really it's a security program, if you want to think about it that way, once the security program is in place and everything is running, we want to provide as many resources, awareness training, job training, and we want to communicate as often as possible with our team so that they are aware of what our risks are and what they can and cannot do on the information system. Does that make sense? So this is a very big step. While it doesn't seem like much, it's a very big step here, and that's going to move on to operation. So sometime we call this operations and maintenance, but this is operation according to ISO IEC 27001. Operation is when we implement and manage. We are just going to implement and manage controls. So now we know the controls, we want to put the control in place, we have our implementations, and now we are managing those controls to make sure that they are answering all the risks, that the treatment or the response was correct, and that the system is able to carry out its day-to-day operations. And then we want to regularly monitor and review the effectiveness of those controls and take any necessary action to make sure that we are effective with what we do. I don't know how many times I have implemented security controls where I thought it would be work and then it turned out I did not, and you have to go back. You used to start working with the subject matter experts again, come up with better ideas, better solution, and then implement those again. Monitor, see if it is effective okay, it's cool, it's work, and then you go on to something else. Okay, this is no different. That's exactly what we are doing here. So operation or operations and maintenance, and then we moved into performance evaluation. Now this is where we are going to analyze and evaluate how our ISMS is performing, how our security program, our risk management framework, how it is all working using ISMS. So what does the performance look like? When we do any kind of reviews, assessment, or anything like that, how do those come out? What are the results from those audits, from those assessments? And that's going to tell us a lot about what we need to know. So we need to conduct regular audits internally. We can also do them externally and with third parties to come in, assess the effectiveness and the controls, and then identify any gaps, any areas for improvement. We have a control in place that we think is doing one thing. When we tested it, it's really doing this, and the gap is in between. So that's what we are trying to address here, and that help us with improvement, because we can take corrective actions. We can learn from incident through incident response and other things. We can learn from audit, assessment, internal testing, all the things that we do to continuously improve the effectiveness of security management system or the security program or the risk framework. However you want to think about it, this is going to help us promote a culture within the company, within the organization, to actively seek feedback, monitor performance, and implement enhancement, continuously improve. Once we set security in place, it's never done. It's the continuous improvement. We want to always make things better, make things stronger, respond to emerging threats, the common trends that are going on in the industry, and those are consistently changing, as we all know. So we want to actively respond and make this system more secure using this process. And then once we have all this together and we understand the overall structure of our risk framework, how we are going to implement ISO 27001, then we can move into ISO 27002 and start selecting those control and implementing those control against that. So I know during support and operation I talked about controls a little bit. This is where you are going to get your controls from ISO 27002. It's very similar to RMF, where the RMF framework is based out on NIST Special Publication 837 and the control catalog is NIST 853. So it's very similar in that regard. So we are going to pull all the controls from ISO 27002 and then we are going to implement those, and then we are going to go ahead and monitor those over time. So again, you can go over to ISO.org. You can see that the information security controls is right there, and this is the control catalog that you would implement to improve your information security management system or ISMS. That is defined by ISO 27001. Now we will talk about the controls in another video, but for now I really wanted to educate you on the ISO 27001, show you what in the actual standard, the framework, and help you to prepare for the CISSP exam, just in case you see a question on it. So what do you need to take away for the exam and take away from this video? One, ISO 27001 is an international standard for information security management system. If you see this on the exam, because they might use this acronym or they might use this phrase and they will not reference the number. They will do it just to kind of trick you. So if you see it, you need to associate that with ISO 27001. You also want to know that ISO 27001 focuses on the three main principles, which is CIAtriad, or the Trinity of Security: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And at the high level, you need to understand each of the clauses and requirements, understand how it flows through, Do you need to know every one of them for the exam? No, because they are probably not going to ask you that kind of stuff. But it's good idea to understand the flow, because the flow is going to apply to the cybersecurity framework, risk management framework from NIST, and all the other framework that are out there that pretty much follow the same flow. You need to know your scope and objective, you need to know your stakeholders, and then start building your program from there. Okay, so just understand those and be ready for them just in case you see them in the exam. And then we will see you in the next video.